is for you. Here we go, brownies. Here we go. Here we go, brownies. Here we go. Yeah, this for my dogs from the east to the west side. You rockin' brown and orange with me, baby. Let's ride. Represent the land, let them know. Tell them, here we go, brownies. Here we go. Yeah, here we go.
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of the Here We Go Brownies podcast. I'm Allie Heisong, coming at you live from Sneedsbury, North Carolina, and joined with me, as always, out in beautiful Cleveland, Ohio, we've got Dustin. Dustin, how's it going? How you doing?
It's beautiful, but just like Cleveland weather, it gives you a great day and then a crappy day. So it rained, it was windy today, and then it's supposed to be nice again for Saturday, and then crappy on Sunday. So I'm like, great, we get to go on a cruise where I can consistently get 80 degrees for 4 or 5 days. So,
won't that be nice?
And now you're used to the warm weather, as we all know, because you bounce back and forth in North and South Carolina. But you know how it is. You grew up here. Yeah, you know how the
Yes, I do. I know how it goes, and it's the exact reason why I left Northeast Ohio and came south, because I am not a fan of the cold. But I'll tell you what, it's actually been a pretty cold winter down here in the Carolinas as well, like abnormally cold. So it's I can relate a little bit, but it's going to be nice to head to the Caribbean here very soon. So we've got we got to talk about that.
It caught up with us quick, didn't it? Like, boom,
yeah.
This is cruise get ready weekend. And by the way, just full disclosure, I did not go on any diets. I did not exercise. I'm like, you know what? Because I'm going to eat like a king on this thing, right? So then that's going to blow that out of the water, right? Like, that's going to happen, right? Like, we're going to drink and be merry on this thing. I'm like, screw it. When I get back, that's when by the way, I'm signing up to do the 10K in Cleveland. So
Are you?
Yeah, well, yeah. So it's in May. So I figure I got 2 months to at least.
Have you ever done any races before?
So this is so one of my friends back in Boise is from Youngstown, Ohio. I think I told you this. She was a track star at Boardman High School, the same one as Bernie Kosar. She got me to do 13 5Ks in 1 year. I did 13 5Ks in 1 year, and you know what the reason I wanted to do them? You know the reason I wanted to do them? I wanted the medal. I just wanted the cool medals that you get from doing a 5K. So I did all that. And then I did a 10K. And the only reason I did the 10K is because I did the 5K. And I realized when I did the 5K, you didn't get a medal. So I did the 10K. But guess what I learned? The 10K, a lot harder than that 5K. And you feel it a lot more, that 10K. I've never done a half marathon or a full marathon. I don't know if I'd ever want to do a full marathon. Half is doable. Allie, I know you're not a big runner. You don't like to run. I mean, the running is not. But yeah. Anyway, that's crazy.
That's impressive. That's impressive, Dustin. I did not know that about you.
Yeah, I did that. That was a few years ago. But here's the fun thing that people don't realize, and if Michelle ever watches this show, she will attest to this. The first run she ever set me up for was in the dead of winter, February, and it was called the Hot Cocoa Run. And we start the race, and right in the middle of the race, a blizzard starts. So everybody's like, okay, well, let's get out of here. This is ridiculous. I placed first race I'd ever done in my entire life, or 5K. I placed second in my age group, and I'd never done a 5K in my entire life. So I don't know if I just wanted to be done because the weather was so crappy and I wanted to be out of there, or there just was not that many participants. But I will tell you this, and anybody that is we've had Gabby on, she runs all the time. I think she's going to be doing the marathon here in Cleveland. This is the thing about runners. If you ever do a 5K, when you look at a 5K, 10K, half marathon, full marathon, first place people are always like the super athletes, I call them. And then there's a huge gap between first and second place. I'm telling you, like, there's multiple minutes between that first and second place person, and then second, third, fourth, and fifth, just because those are like the super athletes that really are true professional runners.
I've run, I think, one race in my entire life, and I've had enough of that. But the one and only race, well, actually, I can't say that. I was in junior high, I think. I ran a race in my hometown, and I said, I'm going to sign up for this. Why not? And I came in first place. So then I decided, wow, I must be like an elite athlete. I must be like cream of the crop, the best that's ever done it. I am Usain Bolt. I am the best that there ever was. So I signed up for cross country. That was short lived. That I was not the best runner of all time. I just happened to luck into that. But
yeah, and by the way, because you're competitive, that makes sense.
yeah, I was
Anybody
like
that's just in the
13 and
show,
I won a whole race. I don't know. It was just luck. But nonetheless, guys, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it. Enough talk about running. But we've got a pretty jam-packed show for you tonight. We are going to be joined with Browns legend Phil Dawson here in just a few moments. So stay tuned. We've got a whole lineup of questions for him. Really looking forward to that interview. Dustin, I know that you had spoken to him, and
Mhm.
on the show. So this is going to be great. So stay tuned. We're going to have him on probably in the next 10 minutes or so. But I want to kick it off with what we've got going on here in just a few short days, really. Dustin, we are headed to the Caribbean. We are going to be on a cruise. So here's a quick word from our friends over at Seaside Events.
There, Browns fans, pack your bags for the ultimate dog pound at sea party on the amazing Independence of the Seas in March of 2024 as we embark on a 5-day all-inclusive Caribbean cruise. Spend time with your favorite Browns alumni like Josh Cribbs, Eric Metcalf, Webster Slaughter, and many more. Presented by Seaside Events. Cabins are selling fast, so book yours now. Visit BrownsFanCruise.com or call 216-284-6472 today.
All right, Dustin, let's get into it. I want to kick it off with just some news and updates as it pertains to the Cleveland Browns. I know that you shared a post on our Facebook page about Joe Flacco. So let's talk about that. I know that's kind of a hot topic right now in Berea and what's going on with that. If they want to bring Flacco back in and if, he wants to come back to Cleveland and what that looks like. So I'll turn it over to you. Your thoughts on that?
I'm just going to say I put that post out there, and if you want some comic relief, go read the threads on that post because
there's nothing like a good polarizing Facebook post. That's always just such a treat.
I'm just telling you, it went viral. Literally, it went viral. And what I tell you what, here's the thing, and a lot of you guys know I work, for Odyssey and 92.3 The Fan today, and they had Mike Florio on, and this comment was brought up, and I want your take on this, Allie. Cleveland is in kind of a weird, precarious type of situation here, right? The fans love Flacco. We love Joe Flacco. We love what he did for the city, the energy he brought.
Yeah.
Deshaun Watson's our starting quarterback. You bring somebody back like Joe Flacco, who's in the shadows, right? Kind of looking like, hey, I'm right over here. Remember those great games I had? I can just jump right in there. Is that a risk for the franchise? And I'll ask you this, Allie. Is that a risk for the franchise to bring somebody that had so much success at the end of the season and was like a lightning rod for this franchise and this fan base and what he did for that? And obviously, Joe felt that, right? He said, the fans are amazing. My family got treated great here. I love the players. I mean, you saw when Njoku said it was hilarious. He's like, yeah, I had to check him out, make sure he wasn't a spy, because he came from the Ravens, all these fun things. So, but he really, a lot of these guys, Amari, have spoke very highly of him. There is some risk versus reward. I mean, yes, the reward is you have a great backup quarterback. God forbid something happens to Deshaun Watson, can literally come in and run the offense without even a blink of an eye, right? The problem is, and we know this, when a quarterback starts to struggle being the starting quarterback, who is the best and favorite football player in town? The backup quarterback.
Yep, always.
Right, exactly. So it's like, so I want to get your take on that before we bring Phil on, because that's what you have to weigh as a franchise here, and I think Andrew Berry has to be very delicate with this situation.
Okay, so I think first and foremost is recognizing how the NFL is going to approach quarterbacks on the roster. I think if you go back a couple of years ago, even like pre-COVID, it was like, okay, you're not going to have more than 2 quarterbacks on your roster. That's just taking up space for another move. And I think even post-COVID, it was kind of like, okay, well, it's kind of weird to have more than 2 quarterbacks on your active roster. I think kind of gone are those days. You're going to see, especially Browns fans, right? Knowing what we know from this past year and what we've learned out of all of the injuries, not just to the quarterback position, but to every single solitary position on this team, is you need depth. And I think that holds true with the quarterback room. So I think we need to kind of recognize that having 3 quarterbacks on your active roster isn't a crazy thing anymore, as it once was.
Right.
And then it becomes, okay, well, how do you define QB1, QB2, QB3? Because that's really difficult, especially when you've got 3 guys that can run an offense. Now, I know that kind of the jury's still out on DTR, but going off of the ceiling that we think that he has and the potential that he did show once Deshaun did go down after PJ Walker, when he stepped in and before he got hurt in that Denver game, he showed a lot of promise. So defining those roles is difficult, especially with such a veteran in that of Joe Flacco. He wants to start, clearly. Why wouldn't he? I think any quarterback in the National Football League wants to be a starter.
Right.
So being able to define that and knowing where they fit and them being okay with whatever the situation is, them being okay with, hey, this is my role. I mean, going back to Jacoby Brissett a few years ago, he knew what his role was in Cleveland, and he was very good at it. And I think a lot of people were pounding the table, us included, last year when Deshaun went out before the trade deadline saying, Andrew Berry, you got to get him back in here. So I think it's kind of similar. And I think if it can work out to where everybody's on the same page in knowing their role, I think it could be a beneficial possible relationship if he were to come back.
Yeah. And one of the comments that interesting Mike Florio brought up today was, what the NFL also views quarterbacks of that age at too, right? A lot of these franchises are looking for that 21, 22, 23-year-old quarterback if they're, kind of on the reset button. And they're even saying there isn't a lot of market right now for even a 29-year-old Baker Mayfield because he's going to be reaching 30 soon, right? So it's interesting. And then you just take that another decade, 39-year-old, then soon to be turning 40, Joe Flacco, right? So you're kind of, are you wanting to do that with a franchise, right? So there is that. And he even brought up the point, you also want to be that franchise that says, yeah, we screwed up. We made those phone calls to Joe Flacco's agent when he was put on the practice squad with the Browns, and we actually wanted him to come play quarterback for us, or do we just say, no, we don't want to admit that mistake, and we'll just move on with what we have. So you're right. It is kind of a weird atmosphere. Mm-hmm. And he even brought up the point where it's not even at times in the NFL last year a good market for backup quarterbacks, let alone starting quarterbacks, right? Like It's been it was a very weird year for quarterbacks in the NFL, and so many of them went down, and there was whoa, there is definitely a vacuum of good quarterbacks. And we found that out when all these starters went down last year.
Yeah. I mean, depth is key here. And I think being able to have a veteran presence that can come in and be that guy, because ultimately, and I know David talked about this last week on the podcast, maybe it was the week before, we were talking about Deshaun's shoulder. Yes, all signs are pointing to him making a full recovery. It should be no problem. But what if there is some actual rest? I know we've used that term a little delicately on the show as it pertains to Deshaun Watson's play. But what if there actually is some rest there? I think that's a real thing. And maybe having somebody like Joe in the quarterback room to be a competitive threat to him in and of itself isn't always a bad thing. So look, I'm open to it. I think it would be good as long as I can work out a deal. But obviously whatever ends up with Joe Flacco, I think we as Browns fans wish him the absolute best for what he did during his time in Cleveland. So we are going to bring on our next guest. I'm sure you can guess who it is. But before we do so, here's a quick word from our friends over at Circle K.
Circle K's new free Inner Circle membership program is all about making it easy to reward you with the things you'll love. Sign up and save 25 cents per gallon on your first 5 fill-ups. Plus, get every 6th free on a tasty selection of Circle K products. We're talking piping hot pizza, fresh coffee, ice-cold fountain drinks, and more. Join Inner Circle for free by downloading the Circle K app today. Terms and conditions apply at participating locations. Visit CircleK.com for details.
All right, and with that, let's bring on Browns legend Phil Dawson. Again, this interview is brought to you by our friends over at Circle K. Phil, how's it going?
Man, it's going great. How about y'all? How's the weather up there?
Well, you know how the weather isn't.
Yeah.
You're not used to wind or rain off the lake here.
He knows nothing about that, right?
Not anymore. I don't.
It's always sunny in Texas, or the wind blows still down there, and we'll get into that later. But Phil, thanks for coming on. It was great to actually meet you down there in Hartville among the fans. My first question is to you. You came down there, you're around the fans. What did you take of that? I mean, it'd been a little while since you'd been out in these neck of the woods. A lot of people do know that you coach high school football, so you're so passionate about football. What did you think of that experience? And, what was it like being back here in Northeast Ohio for a couple of days?
Well, first of all, it was great to be back. It's hard, like you said, with me coaching to get away. So any chance I have to get back to Northeast Ohio, I really look forward to it. And that was a first class event. I'll be honest, I was a little shocked how many people came. There were some current players going to show up and do some autographs after I was done, and in my mind, I kind of thought, well, they're getting the old guy out of the way, and then all the people are going to show up, when I'm done. But man, it was solid, and man, it just reminded me just how incredible it was to build the relationship with the city the way I did, and for that many people to continue to come out, just say hi, let me sign a few things. That was really cool.
Phil, with that, we've interviewed several former players that have gone elsewhere in their career, or maybe went to California, or like Eric Metcalf he lives in Seattle. But anytime they come back to Cleveland, they are just welcomed with open arms. Is that kind of the vibe that you still get? Are you surprised by that fan reaction? Because I think we're such diehards that we love the legends, but do you kind of get that similar sense?
Absolutely. I mean, I remember getting to Cleveland, on that expansion team in '99. We were all imports. We knew of the Browns, but we really didn't know anything about it. And I remember hearing guys like Doug Deacon, Lou Groza, Kevin Mack, guys like that talking about, man, this is such a special place, and these people will support you through thick and thin. And I'll be honest, as a young kid, you really don't even care about that. You're just trying to win a job, survival mode. But fortunate that I was able to stay there as long as I was, really build those relationships. And I tell you what, everything those guys told me back in 1999, they were right.
So here's a question for you. We just this last summer had Matt Stover on,
Yep.
and he gave it was very interesting. We brought him on right with all the Cade York kind of not making kicks, and with Dustin Hopkins not even really becoming a Cleveland Brown. And he had a very interesting foresight, and I think you'll have something to say about this. But he said, he's from Texas, and
Yep.
the wind blows a lot in Texas, and I'm
Yep.
from Texas, and the wind blows a lot in Texas.
Yep.
And he goes, and there's another guy by the name of Phil Dawson,
Yep.
who's from Texas, and the wind blows a lot, and you are not going to. It's more adaptable. Cleveland is not an easy place to kick, and it does take an adjustment, and it does take a certain type of mentality and a certain type of art to be able to kick those, especially when that wind comes off the lake and swirls in there. Tell us a little bit about that and the art of what you had to do when you came in here, because obviously you are used to kicking in the wind. And being a Texas Longhorn, Eric Metcalf, talks about that all the time. But, walk us through that, what it's like and what that experience was when you had to come to Cleveland and really adapt to somewhere, that doesn't get, we get some extreme weather down here, like snow, for instance, right? I've seen you kick things through the snow, and I know it doesn't snow in Texas. So explain how you had to really, create that art of kicking here.
Yeah, Mason Crosby's another Texas boy, long career in Green Bay. So it's not 100%, but there's a pretty good list of guys who've grown up down here and face those adverse conditions. Depending on, it's such a big state, depending on where you are, you really could face snow. You could face hurricanes in the southeast. You could face, the straight line desert winds out west. I mean, it's all over the place. So I think we just kind of get used to kicking in conditions. And then, obviously nothing can prepare you for Cleveland until you get there. And so early on, I made a commitment that even if the team was practicing inside, if the game was going to be on Sunday in an outside venue, especially a home game, I was outside kicking in the junk. And I literally would have to run inside for the portion of practice where I kicked in front of the team. But the rest of the time, I mean, I was out in it. And that was the only way I knew to prepare. I didn't think that going down to the stadium was really all that beneficial. I mean, you need to be familiar. But if I went down there on a Tuesday, all that did was prepare me for Tuesday. So my mindset was always, what are the conditions today? How do I get the job done? And, I tell people it's where science meets art. So building your technique and having a repeatable technique is the science, and you've got to be down pat. You got to train it, work on it constantly. But in Cleveland, unlike other places, you got to have some feel. That's where the art comes in. And some of the kicks I'm most remembered for had nothing to do with technique. It was everything about figuring out how to get the ball through the yellow post. And so I think it takes a creative guy, to be honest, a very disciplined technician, but then also someone who can marry that with some feel and the ability to just figure it out. And no two kicks are the same. No two Sundays are the same. And I got a lot of pats on the back later in my time there where everyone said, "Oh, you must have this all figured out." I wanted to say, y'all have no idea.
So, but with that, right? I mean, you mentioned feel and how it would take some time to get the feel of kicking in Cleveland. How long did that take you to? I won't even say feel comfortable kicking in Cleveland because I'm sure that there's never a level of comfortability there. But
Yep.
how long did it take you within your career to feel like you had a decent grip on the conditions in Cleveland?
Yeah, I don't know that I ever had a decent grip. There were a few things that I picked up, like when wind comes out of the southwest corner, those were going to be the rough days. But it was constantly changing. And so, Chris Palmer, when I made the Browns in '99, came up to me on final cut day. I see the other guys leaving, and he said, "Well, we're going to start out with you." And I really don't know that I ever shook that mentality. Like, I'm one bad kick from this whole thing being over. And so when you approach the game with that kind of mindset and add to it, no two kicks are the same in Cleveland, I don't know that I ever got comfortable. Just because I'd been successful in the past absolutely was not a guarantee that it would happen again. So in some ways, it's exhilarating. When I got to Arizona and kicking in the dome, to be quite honest, it got a little boring. You aim in the same place every time. The footing's the same every time. I kind of missed that adventure.
Yeah.
Didn't miss it too bad, but it kind of kept me on the edge of my seat and really made it fun.
After like, man, this Arizona weather is pretty nice. So
Uh-oh, Dustin, you still there?
what
Looks
I
like
think
he
is one of
froze.
the funnest,
Oh, there he is.
greatest kicks of all time is where they had to pull out the rule book after you guys all went to the locker room, right?
Yep.
Where you literally hit the inside of the crossbar and the ball bounces back out and they go to the rule book and technically by the rules. And I even saw you kind of go, "Oh man," right?
Yeah.
And then to learn that you actually did make a good field goal. Tell me what that was like, because you know how the players kind of get all calm and then they go in the locker room and then you got to put your pads back on. But I got to tell you, on national television, that was crazy to be like, "No, hang on, folks, this kick is actually good." So.
Yeah, what a crazy series of events. Little context: a week before, I missed a 53-yard game tire at Pittsburgh. And that week was obviously one of the toughest weeks of my professional career. I'd been in Cleveland long enough to understand how important that game was to the city, and it felt like I let everybody down. And so to grind and try to pick myself back up and go back out there 1 week later against another hated rival, some say more hated than the Steelers. I won't get into all that, but to try a game tire again, see the ball bounce all over the place. Another 50-plus yard game tire. See the referee signal no good. That video you saw where I bent down to grab my knees, I literally was thinking about what Coach Palmer said in 1999. I can't survive this. I've just missed kicks to get beat by Pittsburgh and Baltimore in back-to-back weeks. No one survives that.
Yeah, and rivals to us, yeah.
So I thought it was over. I thought I was going home. And then all of a sudden, the referees say they're going to take a look at it. They reverse their call. And now all of a sudden, we got to regroup, go to overtime. Josh got a huge return, which was pretty typical. We got a couple of first downs, and we went out and kicked a field goal to win the game. So what a crazy series of events there. And I sure am glad it worked out the way it did.
So
you didn't get the call from Chris, right?
Yeah, yep. Seriously. So I want to talk about that a little bit because we have seen many kickers since you in Cleveland really struggle. So I want to just talk about the mental grit behind it, the mental preparation of being able to just be able to kick in Cleveland in and of itself. So I mean, I know you've kind of walked us through what your preparation was on the field or the week of a game, but can you walk us through kind of the mental preparation and how you dealt with that? 'Cause I mean, that is taxing, I can imagine.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, when I got there, I had to hear about Lou Groza all the time, which obviously
Yeah.
is golden shoes. Uh, but it had been a while since Lou the Toe had played, so it wasn't constantly in my face. I think one thing the kickers that have followed me have had to deal with is I was still playing, doing my own thing elsewhere, and then the team continued to struggle a little bit. And whenever somebody would miss a kick, by the way, I miss kicks, but when someone up there would miss a kick, they immediately were compared to me, and so I
Yeah.
think that's a burden that is unfortunate, uh, and it can eat you up. Uh, you got to play your game. You got to do it your way. And I'm sure those guys got tired of hearing about me every time they missed a kick. But in terms of the mindset, you got to be a competitor. My practice squad year in New England, I was behind Adam Vinatieri, and I don't know that I learned much kicking wise from Adam, and I know that's heresy. But what I did learn was his competitive spirit.
Mhm.
Nobody was gonna. I mean, the bigger the stage, the truer the ball was going to be. Adam Vinatieri is not the greatest kicker I've ever seen, skill wise. But I'll tell you what, I want him on my team when the game comes down to the end. And it's because of his intense competitive spirit. And so if I was a guy looking for the next Browns kicker, by the way, we found one. But if
Mhm.
let's say we hadn't, I'd be looking for the kid growing up that played multiple sports. When he rounded third base, he was speeding up to go home. He was diving for loose balls in basketball. Uh, when he fell off his bike, he didn't go home crying to mama. He got right back up on the bike and got going. I mean, you got to have some grit and mental toughness about you, and that competitive spirit is what's most required to kick in Cleveland.
Yeah.
Here's a question for you. As we all know, during your time in Cleveland, coaches were kind of on a carousel, right? If
Yeah.
they didn't win, they were out for 2 years. You were the consistent, along with Joe Thomas. I always
Yeah.
said I can pretty much guarantee Phil Dawson's going to kick us a good field goal, and Joe Thomas is going to keep our quarterback from getting destroyed in this football game.
Yep.
And obviously you probably have a special bond with Joe, and we've had him on a couple times on our show. Tell us what that was like to be that veteran in the locker room, like Joe, that kind of has to keep the spirits up of everybody, because the culture was different than it is now in Cleveland, right? Where players now do want to come to Cleveland, where it is a winning culture. And Allie and I've talked about this, and since we started this podcast back, of changing the culture from how hard it is to go from a losing culture to a winning culture.
Yeah.
And that coaching high school football, right?
Yep.
Getting these kids to believe in that. Walk us through that and kind of tell us how you kind of weathered that storm, because I can only imagine, playing for some of those teams that just weren't that good. I mean, in 2002, you make the playoffs, right? A few years into your career, but walk us through us and tell us what that was like, because that had to be very challenging.
Yeah, it was challenging, and like Joe Thomas, obviously day one, if he spoke up, everyone's listening. I mean, we all knew the guy was a future Hall of Famer in the first training camp, so he immediately had a voice, and I loved it when Joe spoke up because he was always right, and he had wisdom, and he wasn't afraid to share it, and that was awesome. He didn't overly talk, but when he did, you listen. I played a far different position. Uh, I chose and identified early on that I needed to lead by example. Uh, as I got older, I did find my voice a little bit, but even then, it was very strategic because I knew at the end of the day, I play a position that's far different than what those guys play.
Mhm.
And so, whether we were winning, whether we were losing, whether things were going good, things were going bad, new coach, old coach, I just tried to consistently come and work hard every day, independent of how things were going. And I think over time, my teammates appreciated that. And I also think they appreciated I kind of kept my mouth shut. Uh, and that's, I've seen some kickers take some missteps in that area. They get established in the league and they come in, try to be the loud guy in the locker room. Uh, I would suggest they pay more attention to their surroundings and just be the hardest working guy on the team, and always be prepared to give an answer. right? Instead of going around talking. So when guys see you working hard, even though you're 3-13, you can say, it's my job. No one's going to outwork me. Think how powerful that is. You wait for the question, you work hard every day, you only have to say one sentence, and right there you have leadership. And so uh, I think most young players, that should be the strategy they go with. And then depending on what position you play, you should react accordingly.
So you mentioned we've got a kicker now, Dustin Hopkins. Um, the season, changed pretty drastically when he went out. It was. I mean, the Browns suffered a lot of losses this year in terms of injuries. That was a really, really big one, especially at that point in the season. But one of my favorite things to hear is whenever the Browns would sign a new kicker or draft a new kicker, they would always say, "Oh, they're going to reach out to Phil Dawson. They need to talk to Phil Dawson." What message do you portray to those young guys that are coming to Cleveland? Is it similar, like, hey, just be a good teammate, speak up, be a leader? But what type of, actual kicking, feedback do you give them?
Yeah, it was special to me that comments like that were made whenever we'd sign a new kicker. Made me still feel part of the organization. I'm very grateful for that. In all honesty, however, a check the box conversation is insufficient. There's no way in one conversation I can pass on 21 years of what I learned to a young kid who, quite honestly, probably didn't even want to talk to me, but coach, organization is making them. Nothing against the young kid. I don't blame them. Who wants to listen to the old know-it-all, right? But I've struggled. Just full disclosure, I'll see a guy struggling, and then I'll read, oh, he met with Phil, and then I'm like, oh, give me more of a chance than that. I'd love to work with the kid.
Yeah.
And it takes time. It really takes time. So while I appreciate the opportunity to talk to those guys, one talk isn't going to do it.
Yeah.
Phil,
So what do you see in oh, sorry, Dustin, don't mean to cut you off. Just off of that, what do you see in Dustin? Do you think he's a long-term answer in Cleveland?
Yeah, I love
Hopkins, that is.
he's a pro. I mean, just watch the way he's got a routine. He's very methodical.
Mhm.
Next time I see him, I'm going to joke with him that it takes him 3 days to get lined up. But that's because he's paying such attention to detail. And that tells me he's got a process he goes through. He's very focused. It's very repeatable. He's got a huge leg. It's not about how far you can kick it, or it's not about your best ball. It's about your worst ball. So, yeah, everyone falls in love with the big leg. But at the end of the day, put the ball between the posts. Who cares if you make 70-yarder? You're never going to try one of those. So I'd rather try to find a guy who's 55 and in good, can place the ball all over the place on kickoffs. And I think he's got that rare combo. He can go deep, but he also has control of the football. And it really showed up in the kickoff game. He essentially took other teams' kickoff returns out of the game with that big leg. So I'm really excited about him. Be eager to see how he comes back from the hammy. Should be totally fine. Now he's got a year under his belt. Hopefully everyone will just exhale a little bit, let him go to work, and we'll just start seeing those balls pour in.
Yeah.
So I have a two-part question. So my first one is, growing up and becoming a kicker, who was who you looked up to? Who was your mentor, as far as kicking that you looked at the collegiate level, the NFL level? And my second question is, are you a little tougher on the kickers on the high school football team versus some of the other players?
All right, I'll answer your second question. Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. I'm not proud of it, but I've identified that's an area of growth for me. But I don't have a lot of patience. So I'll work on that. In terms of role models, y'all probably heard me say this before. I never wanted to be a kicker. I wanted to play other positions. I did all the way through high school. It became pretty clear that going to college, kicking was my path. And so that's, when I got to college, that's when I became a kicker only. So with all due respect to the kickers that came before me, I didn't look up to any of them because I never wanted to do it. I wanted to be a, quote, real football player. And when I came to the reality check that my future in football was kicking, I made the decision way back when, even though I was just the kicker, I was going to approach it the same way a football player would. And that's where the work ethic and the discipline and the toughness and all the, I tried to learn the game. I didn't just sit in special teams meetings. I'd go in offensive and defensive meetings. I'd ask coaches questions on the bus. And in some ways, those experiences have allowed me to now be a head football coach, just from soaking up every ounce of football all those years. So I'm glad it worked out the way it did, but it certainly wasn't my original plan in the game of football.
Yeah. Phil, we'll get you out of here on this one. A question from our friend George. Can we ever see you back in the orange and brown if the Browns were to make the Super Bowl?
I'll tell you what, if we'll start a collection for a walker or an ice bath or something, I could probably get you through a game, but I'm not going to be able to walk for weeks. So however many kicks the good Lord gave me, I think I used them up. But, man, I'll tell you what, I can't wait for that day. And I'll see all y'all on Euclid Avenue when we have that parade for the Lombardi Trophy.
Yeah, most definitely. Phil, thanks for taking the time for us. We really appreciate it.
Thank y'all. I like your show.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Go Browns.
Browns.
Appreciate it. All right, that is Browns legend Phil Dawson. That interview was brought to you by our friends over at Circle K. Dustin, that was a lot of fun.
Wow. I always say
So
when
cool.
we get these guys on here,
so cool.
I got to say that might be the most views we've had on the show ever.
That was fun. Okay, I got to tell you, normally whenever we interview anybody on the show, I don't really get nervous because we've got preparation. So full disclosure, everybody, I don't know, 20 minutes before we go on or before I actually sent Dustin over the link and everything today, he calls me. He's like, oh, by the way, we have Phil Dawson. So I was like, oh, okay. Okay, well, so.
By the way, I got the text from his agent that said, hey, by the way, Phil is good for tonight. And I'm like, that's in 3.
Okay. All right. So normally I do not get nervous at all because, I love talking football with these guys. But that one was like, oh, I gotta prep. This is crazy. We're talking to Phil Dawson. So I mean, that was a lot of fun. He was great.
And he brought up a really good point, and I can't stress this enough, Allie. Phil was down in your neck of the woods, down there by Hartville, and there was a line that went down the hallway, around the corner, and outside to see Phil, and that just tells you,
I believe it,
how much the fans love this. Because as you know, I call them Browns 2.0, the team that came back after '99. Phil Dawson and Joe Thomas were the consistents. I mean, they were the two that when you went out there on Sundays to watch football, you knew they were going to give you your A game, and everybody else was going to be okay, but they didn't play to that level. Yeah. And I think you brought up a really good point about he kept his head down, he worked really hard, and he used his voice when he needed to. And who came to mind was someone that I got to see last weekend is Nick Chubb. No maintenance, work hard. Go out, do your job, and the people around you will respect you, and you'll lead by example. And I think that's what Phil did, even though he said he goes, they wanted to play a real position in football. He led by example, right? Like he just put his head down and worked hard and grind. And I think it's the best part of that interview was the fact that he said, I was a little bored kicking field goals.
That's unbelievable. That's unbelievable. That's crazy.
Think about what kicker in the National Football League can say, I was a little bored kicking field goals. It was just
Phil Dawson. Yeah, that sounds about right. You mentioned our friends over at Hartville. Dustin, why don't you tell our listeners about that?
Guys, if you haven't been down to the Hartville Flea Market and Marketplace down in Hartville, go down there and check it out. They have a lot of great shops, great restaurants. They have the hardware store right next door. And by the way, look for more actual Browns coming down there in the near future for signings. We've been a big part of that ever since we partnered with them a couple weeks ago. As you know, we gave a bunch of Tom Darden giveaways and autographs, and even some other autograph sessions. So look forward to those guys. If you haven't been down there, give them a shot. They're a great place. And Allie, I know you spent probably a lot of your childhood, teenage years in that place, because it's massive. You don't really understand how big of a place that is till you actually get there. So, and it's, by the way, it's out in the middle of nowhere, everybody. It literally is out in the middle of nowhere. It's just you're out among houses.
If you think that is in the middle of nowhere,
well, I know Magnolia.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, as far as like
Yeah.
going from a city, you're in the
Yeah.
country literally there. Yeah.
You are.
So,
Yep, you are.
yeah.
So that was a lot of fun. Before we bring on our next guest, here's a quick word from our friends over at Lorello.
Everybody, my name's Kim Lorello, and my husband and I, Larry, started Lorello Vineyards over 21 years ago. We're a small cantina nestled in the Grand River Valley in Geneva, Ohio. Our winery consists of 2 beautiful tasting rooms, and we have 2 rooms that can transform into party rooms inside. Our menu here at Lorello's is home cooking. We have wood-fired Tuscan pizzas, paninis, salads, and several appetizers. We have award-winning wines that have won medals internationally, nationally, and locally. In the summer and springtime, we have a beautiful outdoor patio that also we have live entertainment. We also have entertainment sporadically through the entire year inside during our cool fall and winter months. Additionally, outside in the summer, we have a beautiful tent that can house several guests for a private function. We hope to see you soon, and if you want any more information on Lorello Vineyards, you can go to our website at www.lorellovineyards.com. We hope to see you soon.
All right, and with that, let's bring on our next guest, and that is Dr. David Ullery for the Medical Minute, and that was brought to you by our friends over at Lorello. David, what's going on? How you doing?
Hey guys, thanks for having me on again as always. Great interview just a short while ago. You know, Al, you may not get nervous for many of your guests, but I bet you do before I come on.
Oh, I get so nervous anytime you come on. It is.
So David, I have one question for you. Do you ever just get bored doing surgeries?
Yeah.
Oh, not a day in my life.
It's just not enough of a challenge, so you gotta just get bored and hope for something crazier. That was
Yeah,
so
maybe-
crazy.
You tie one hand behind my back for the next one.
Do the next one blindfolded. See how it goes. All right. So tonight I want to talk about something that is maybe not relevant to us as Browns, well, internally with Cleveland Browns, but relevant to us as Browns fans. I want to talk about the Joe Burrow injury because it is different than what Deshaun Watson went through. It's different than really anything that's going on within the division. And I mean, we obviously know it from last year. We played Joe Burrow, was that week 1, I believe, and something just like did not look right, like at all. And they went on to have the season that they had, Burrow out for the season. So I want to talk about that. I know it's his wrist. So David, I want to turn it over to you on the progress of Joe Burrow. And you know, because I think as Browns fans, we gotta get prepped. You know, are we getting the full Joe Burrow experience once again when he comes back? So that's a scary thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the official word or documentation, or however you want to refer to it, is he had his wrist injury on November 16th versus the Ravens in Week 11, and then missed the rest of the season after that. You know, initial thought, a lot of reports were that it was a sprain, and it wasn't as severe as it might appear to be, maybe something on the outside of the wrist. But turns out that it ended up being presumably and most likely what we call a scapholunate ligament injury. And so, especially in someone's throwing hand, I think that can be a pretty severe injury. Now, one of the things that I've learned in my research for this in the NFL specifically is there's not a lot of there's not a big sample size of this injury in quarterbacks specifically, or just in general. But so to kind of give a little background, the wrist is made up of 8 bones connecting the forearm to the hand, kind of all in this area here. There's 2 rows of bones, so there's 4 in the row here, and then 4 in a row just beyond it too. The scaphoid and the lunate are the 2 bones that we're thinking of, or more specifically talking about for Joe here. And the scaphoid is one way down at the base of the thumb on this side of the wrist, and the lunate is right next to it. There's a pretty broad ligament that connects those 2, and acts as a pretty important like harness or check rein for those bones to kind of move together, but also have their independent motions. And I mean, if you just think about one of the things we kind of talk about for a fluid wrist motion is a dart thrower's motion. So you're able to bend your wrist backwards and extend it, and then when you throw it, you bend your wrist forward and flex it. And it's a very easy movement for most of us to do. It's very fluid, it's very smooth, but the mechanics behind it are very complicated because of those 8 small bones. There's a lot of movement that happens between them, and any disruption of those bones or the ligaments connecting them can cause a lot of problems and pain. And you can imagine a dart throwing motion is pretty similar to a quarterback's throwing motion, where there's extension and in your follow through, there's flexion, and your wrist moves back and forth like this. And so the injury that he suffered specifically is the ligament that connects those two bones. And what happens is when that ligament's torn, those bones not only separate, but then they start kind of rotating in different directions relative to another. And that's not normal motion. That's very abnormal. And so it causes 1, instability, 2, pain, and 3, if not treated, can lead to some pretty significant arthritis in the wrist. And so these are pretty poorly tolerated without surgery. A lot of people, if they suffer it, whether they're just doing recreational workouts or doing push-ups or trip and fall, any number of things, it can cause some pretty significant dysfunction or pretty significant disability. And so for someone who's a quarterback and a throwing athlete, it's a pretty important stabilizer to the wrist. So he had a surgery to reconstruct that ligament. There's any number of ways to do it. Overall, success rate for that surgery is 75 to 80%. So, I mean, certainly not, the most optimistic numbers, but it's better than 50%. And again, as we've talked about before, professional athletes have a lot more resources at their disposal. So those numbers are probably a little bit higher in athletes, especially in the NFL. But like I said, there isn't a huge sample size for this. I mean, just kind of a brief search for me. Couple players that come to mind, Jerry Hughes in 2020 for the Bills suffered this same injury. And then Darrelle Revis in 2016 had this. They both had surgery. This injury ended Darrelle Revis this season. Jerry Hughes kind of played through it, but had surgery after the season. And then just another, I guess, more recent example would be Bradley Beal for the Wizards in 2022, who also had this injury. And so, those guys all did make a comeback and come back and play, but I think the key differentiator is none of them were a quarterback, and it wasn't their throwing wrist. And so I think, reading some articles from some of the Bengals media, they seem pretty optimistic about his return. He's already had the surgery. It's usually 3 to 4 months for a recovery from this sort of surgery to get back to activity like throwing. And so he anticipates returning to throwing in May. Mid-May is his kind of expected timeline. So as long as everything goes according to plan, he'll be back for the season. But I do wonder if this is going to impact his velocity and his accuracy, just because it's such an important ligament for this wrist. And so we'll kind of see how things go in the spring. But, obviously you never want to see a guy get hurt. And so hopefully he can have a good recovery. But, I mean, he's had so many injuries throughout his career already. It makes you nervous every time he gets hurt. Right.
I mean, George says it here. They better get a better offensive line. I mean, especially when you're going up against the defensive lines in the AFC North, it's a real problem for the Bengals. So 2 things I want to talk about with that. One, nice bracelet. I think that's very nice on you. I wonder who got it for you. And 2, would that be why? I think it would have been. Gosh, I can't remember when it was, but we saw a video of Joe Burrow when he got hurt throwing the ball, and it literally just fell out of his hand. Would that be the exact reason why?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. Dr. Chow. Dr. Chow had a little interview on Sports Illustrated kind of describing that. And he kind of pinpointed it to a specific play when Jadeveon Clowney hit Joe Burrow. And so, yes, I mean, that's exactly it. You saw him come off the field kind of holding his wrist. And on the sideline, they had video of him trying to throw the ball, and he just had no power behind it, no strength behind it. And because anytime he tried to make this throwing motion, those bones were split apart where they shouldn't be and rotating against each other. And so it just causes severe pain and just no ability to generate force through the wrist.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes sense. Go ahead, Dustin. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, as you talk about these injuries and stuff like that, I mean, obviously, do you think that'll affect his, when he goes to training camp, will that be kind of trying to, or is he going through those strengthening motions now, to kind of get that wrist, you know what I mean? Like to get back to, I always use how the people have the grip things they kind of use to try to get, like they call it, when they're trying to get their grip back. Is that something he's probably doing now and something he's preparing himself for when he's going to start throwing here pretty soon for minicamp?
I would imagine so. Because, apart from specifically putting too much pressure on that wrist the first couple of weeks while the ligament reconstruction heals, he can do cardio, obviously, no problem, and stay in shape that way. When it comes to rehabbing the wrist, it's a gradual progression, just like anything else. So probably in a splint or a cast for a couple of weeks after the surgery, get the cast removed, just start getting that range of motion back, get the stiffness out of the wrist. And once that range of motion is restored, and we know that the ligament's likely healed to a point where you can start stressing it, then yeah, they'll use whether it's a soft ball or those devices like you're talking about to start working on grip strength as well as other things to work on his dexterity. So,
Right.
I mean, he kind of made a comment that he doesn't really throw that much in the off season until OTAs anyway. And so from a throwing mechanic, from a conditioning for the arm perspective, this isn't going to affect him too much. And obviously, this happened in week 11, so he did miss, 7 games. And so there's a little element of deconditioning there, but overall, his offseason hasn't been altered dramatically. And so as long as he is, making progress as anticipated, he should be back for training camp and not have too many issues. But again, I don't have much of a precedence for this in a throwing athlete's dominant hand. And so you never know. I mean, this truthfully, I can't put a number on it or speculate that much, but I mean, if it's as severe as they may have described it to be, I mean, it could be a much more serious injury and could potentially be career ending if he can't recover from it fully. And I mean, to answer that question, likely not. I don't think he'll need to wear a wrist brace or anything just because that's going to hinder his ability to throw.
Yeah.
And if he's wearing a brace, then he's probably going to need something else done. Maybe some light taping, but overall, he's going to want to have as much flexibility and freedom in that wrist as he can. And I think a brace is just going to limit that. And if he has to wear a brace to try and throw, that may be an indicator of something more severe going on and a sign that it may not be long for him to be able to throw like that. So you hope he makes a full recovery just for the, competitive nature of the division and just so, seeing another Ohio guy be able to return to form. But there's not a lot of history or precedence for this specific injury.
Well, and I guess for me, David, just, I'll get you out of here on this, but the fact that he has not been able to stay consistently healthy over years, because of his offensive line in the past, he had the leg injury early on in training camp last year, then the wrist, and then, he was out a whole season, a couple of years before that. I think as an organization, they have to look inside truly and protect him because he is the franchise, right? At the end of the day, you want to keep this guy upright and healthy. And I think to your point, your body can only take so many beatings, right? So many things, especially at the quarterback position, to where at some point you don't recover from these things as much. So I think if I'm the organization, I'm looking internally and seeing how much protection we can give him next season.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we've talked about that before. As just fans of the game, like we've seen it before with him in years past. Like this guy needs to be protected. We've all seen the potential. We know what he can do. I mean, he had one of the best, if not the single most best season for a college football quarterback in the history of college football. And so the potential's there and the talent's there. It's just a matter of having him protected. But I mean, to your point, Dustin, looking at this list right now, 2017 for Ohio State, fracture in his hand. 2020 at LSU, torn rib cartilage. 2020 in the NFL, ACL tear with an MCL tear as well as a PCL tear and a meniscus. 2021, he dislocated his finger. 2022, strained his knee. 2022, an MCL sprain. 2023, he had the calf strain in the preseason. And then the ligament injury. So the list goes on for him in such a short amount of time. And so you definitely worry for his longevity. And so hopefully the organization can find a way to protect him a little bit better for their future.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, David. That was really good.
Thank you.
Learned a lot there. Thanks for taking the time. We appreciate it. Go Browns.
Go Browns.
Go Browns.
That was Dr. David Ullery talking about Joe Burrow. That was brought to you by our friends over at Lorello Vineyards. Also, I just want to tell you guys about our friends over at Stadium Mustard. If you don't have Stadium Mustard in your kitchen this season, you're doing it wrong. The iconic brand, the iconic taste, and it's beloved from ballparks to backyards and everywhere in between. Stadium Mustard is a smooth brown mustard rich in both taste and tradition, and it's loved by millions. So be sure to head on over to stadiummustard.com to shop now. Dustin, we can close with this. So we have drafted our coaching roster. We have drafted the defense. I think we wrap up the drafts with doing the offense. Now, something that I've done this time, because I know last week was a little difficult. Let me pull this up here. It was a little bit difficult in the sense that you couldn't see what we had going on. So I've created this screen. That way we can keep track. So we're going to draft an offense. Now, when I say offensive line, I just mean like pick a team. So it'll be like, I don't know, the Bengals offensive line, which probably wouldn't recommend doing that, but rather than drafting in particular players. So You actually have the first pick in this draft, so take it away.
So I'm taking the whole unit from a certain team, is what you're saying.
So for the offensive line, yes, but everybody else, you're going to take a player. So quarterback, running back, you're going to draft a player.
Give me the San Francisco 49ers offensive line.
Okay. The 49ers. All right, with that, I get the next two. Give me Patrick Mahomes. And then I will also take, oops. Sorry about that. I'm going to take Justin Jefferson.
Mm-hmm. So
all right, and you're up. You get the next two picks here.
Let's see, quarterback. Who would I like as quarterback? Give me Lamar Jackson.
Okay.
I like the elusiveness, and give me Tyreek Hill.
Okay. All right. Tyreek Hill. Now, everybody, as always, feel free to chime in here in the comments. Who has the better team? Give me a CMC, and I will also take. Give me CMC. Man, who else do I want here?
Who's CMC?
Christian McCaffrey is
yep.
Yeah. I will take Jamar Chase.
Okay.
All right, you're up. Next two.
Give me. Let's see. I'm going to go running back here. Give me Nick Chubb. Give me Nick Chubb. I'm putting some good juju there. And then for wide receiver, give me Deebo Samuel. Give me Deebo.
All right. Deebo. All right, I'm going to take man, I keep doing this. Kittle or Kelsey? Kittle or Kelsey? Kittle or Kelsey? I'm going to go give me Kelsey. Give me a Travis Kelsey, and I will take I still need a running back, so you already have your offensive line. I'm going to take a running back then. Do I want Derrick Henry? Do I want Jonathan Taylor? Do I want Saquon Barkley? No, I don't. You know who I want? And maybe this is a little bit of a reach, but I see the potential. Give me Jahmyr Gibbs, please. And you're up. Your last two here.
So, Allie, I froze a little bit on you. So, who did you pick with your two picks? Sorry, I froze.
I took Travis Kelsey and Jahmyr Gibbs. You still there?
And I froze again. Sorry.
Okay. I took Travis Kelsey and Jahmyr Gibbs.
Jahmyr Gibbs. Okay.
And Travis Kelsey. So you need a running back and a tight end.
Give me Njoku.
Okay.
And I need what else? Sorry. What do I need now?
You need a running back. I have it pulled up here on the screen.
Oh, two running backs. So I need two running backs.
You need one running back.
Oh, I took Nick Chubb. I don't know if you heard that. I took Nick Chubb.
I have it written down.
Okay. So you're saying I need another running back? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay. Did you take Derrick Henry? Did you say that?
Nope. I have Christian McCaffrey and Jahmyr Gibbs here.
Oh, okay. Give me. I like Derrick Henry. Give me Derrick Henry.
All right. And I will take. Give me the Eagles offensive line then. Okay. All right, there you have it, everybody. Feel free to chime in who you think has the better team. Allie has Patrick Mahomes, Christian McCaffrey, Jahmyr Gibbs, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Travis Kelsey, and the Eagles offensive line. And Dustin has Lamar Jackson, Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry, Tyreek Hill, Deebo Samuel, David Njoku in the 49ers offensive line. Feel free to put that there in the comments. And before we wrap up, everybody, we want to tell you about our friends over at K&D Property Group. Whether it is sophisticated suburban living, luxury downtown digs, or senior housing, K&D, the largest property management company in Northeast Ohio, has a perfect home for everyone. K&D is your one-stop shop for housing in the region with apartments and amenities for everyone, including residential, commercial, retail, and also corporate housing. Find your dream home at K&D. Visit knd.com to get started. That is the letter K, the word and, the letter D.com. All right, you're up. Any closing thoughts?
Allie, just going to give a shout out to our friends over at the Barley House, by the way. We were going to be there tonight, but unfortunately we had Phil Dawson on tonight, and we said, we got to do this thing in a quiet environment and keep everything kind of in a good spot. So if you get a chance, go check out our friends over at the Barley House down on West 6. But Allie, did you happen to see who was in town last night in Cleveland?
Oh, yes, I did. It was the tight end that I just drafted in my offensive line, or excuse me, in my offensive draft, and my offensive line because I took the Eagles. So Jason Kelsey and Travis Kelsey, I saw were in the 2-1-6.
Yeah, and did you see they had the biggest comeback to watch from a Cavs deficit in the fourth quarter to beat the first place team, the Boston Celtics? I got to tell you, Allie, it was pretty magical. They gave him, obviously, they are still Clevelanders, and I don't know if you got to see at the very end of the game, they brought over 2 beers in classic.
Oh, yeah.
And they both looked at each other, and they had a chug off, basically. And, of course, the crowd went wild. But, Allie, that was pretty cool, like to see, and that was without Donovan Mitchell in the lineup. So, I mean, for them to come back, and, there's talk, sometimes, has this team got the toughness, the gritness, the grittiness that you want to see from a basketball team? They kind of showed it last night. They kind of took it on the chin early in the game, and they played defense. That's what happened in the fourth quarter. It kept them in the game, and so it was a great game. So I know you're a big Cavaliers fan, and you like watching basketball because you also play basketball. So it's near and dear to you. So.
Yeah, really cool. It's just good to see them starting to kind of turn the corner and operating as a unit. I know that was kind of some of the inconsistencies to start the season. So good to see them playing defense and finally starting to really come together, even with some of the star players out. So that's a thing of beauty, and especially with the Kelsey brothers in attendance. That's really cool. Really fun show tonight. Fun talking to Phil Dawson, learning a lot there, talking to David, and of course doing our draft. Have a lot of fun doing that as always. Thanks everybody for tuning in. This was a lot of fun tonight. Thanks to all of our sponsors as well. So thanks everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy, and as always, Browns fans, go Browns.